can you just help us understand how did you go about preparing for the interview process, and what are specific tips and specific things that you did to prepare, and how did the interview go? Maybe a few things about the interview process in itself.
The time that we're talking about when I had my interview was 2018, and product management was it had just started evolving in India, and there were not a lot of people who were getting into product management, and there were not a lot of resources or seniors or peers I could reach out to who would help me. Thankfully, that outlook has changed, and there were also not enough entry level product management roles from engineering colleges. Now there are a lot of APM roles coming out from a lot of exciting startups.
Right.
I personally know around 10 to 12 startups which have started hiring for APM roles from engineering colleges. So it's very exciting time to be right now for product management. But during that point of time, I just reached out to the people who were working in Flipkart in product, and thankfully, luckily, one of them replied, and through LinkedIn, and he just told me that you should read this book called Cracking the PM Interview. That's the holy grail, and everybody talks about this book, right? And I was like, okay, I shall give it a read, and I started reading this book, and trust me, I think for anybody who is serious about product management, Cracking the PM Interview is one of the most useful resources that you will ever get, right? But then I started looking deeply. I started reading about a lot of Google. So Google had this APM program, which Flipkart bought into India, and where you would take engineering graduates and for their logical thinking, and you will try to groom them into better product managers, which are groomed inside your company. So I started reading about what kind of rounds will be there, and more or less in every product interview, you will find rounds which test three major skills. So the first skill that they are going to test is your problem solving skill, right? Which is, I think, at the core of product management. I don't know a single product manager who's not been a good problem solver. And by problem solver, it's not necessarily just math problems, it's everyday problem, right? People wanted good recommendations. Spotify saw it as an opportunity and came in at the point when Apple was charging us 99 cents for music download. So it started this whole new idea about streaming and doing a subscription based streaming where everybody could hear the music legally for upfront cost. Similarly, there were so many other startups who came out of solving problems innovatively. Flipkart itself started with the understanding that Indian customers don't want to pay online. So they started with COD. And it was essentially, what Amazon was doing, but with COD. So that was a very small innovation, which has created a $20 billion company today, right? It's a mammoth. So I think personally, the way that I saw it was problem solving was one thing that I had to get right. Along with problem solving, the other skills were how do I communicate my thoughts, right? So your communication skills in terms of how precise you are thinking and how concisely you can explain what you are trying to say was very important, and combined with your understanding for technology, right? And as I told you, I did not have any background in coding. I was not interested in my branch at all. So in the proper terms, I would say my technological exposure was not that great, right? But what I used to do all the time was I used to read about the latest technologies that are coming in and how do they work, how do they interact, how do users interact with them. IoT was a thing that time. Big data was a huge thing, right? So I used to read these articles, and then I remember there was this cryptocurrency wave, and where Bitcoin and everything was going off the charts, and I invested in Bitcoin that time. And before investing, I started reading about the tech stack and how Bitcoins are manufactured and all those things. And it was just, the day you spend. So I used to just go to TechCrunch and read some articles. And I used to spend like half an hour on reading these articles. And this has been my habit since my second or third year in college. So I used to read a lot about new products and things that are coming. So coming to Flipkart, we had 3 rounds. One was the problem solving round. Second was the product thinking round, wherein they check, your design sense. And by design sense, it means your user experience understanding, right? Design is not colors, and design is uh, not only colors and how it looks visually, but rather the use of access or use, how easy it is to use, right? So if you look at the things around you, right, your coffee mug, somebody designed it to hold it like that, right? So all
Right.
these are examples of good design. So there is this book by Don Norman which I used to read. It's called Design of Everyday Things, and Don Norman was the chief designer for Apple, and I was fascinated by how good design and bad design are around us everywhere, right? Like the push or pull door and everything that we see around us. So the first interview I go in, and I was asked about, how do you rank, uh, how would you rank products on the search page of Flipkart, and how would you rank jackets on the search page of Flipkart, right? So I was like, okay, let me start, right? And the key to problem solving is to have a really solid structure at the beginning, and basically cover down all the bases that you're trying to answer. And I started with, that jackets can have multiple dimensions, right? They can be winter jackets or they can be summer jackets, and then you will have price points for jackets, right? And what does Flipkart have that will help us understand that the search results, how should we populate them, right? They have immense amount of data. Daily around more than 50 lakh users visit Flipkart, and they are clicking, and we know the kind of clicks that they do, the kind of purchases that they have made. You can figure out the kind of average prices that they will be shopping for. And I kind of told them about a pricing index that I would make. And pricing
Right.
index would be, let's say, for somebody who has never purchased a jacket, and let's say they have purchased a mobile phone, what what are the 80 percentile phones priced at? So you take all the bottom priced 80 percentile phones, take that number and take an average of the cost of all the phones on Flipkart, and see how far they are from these two numbers, right? So that will, and do this for all the categories that they have made a purchase into, right? And look at the kind of keywords that they are searching for. Are they searching for t-shirts under 500, which is another indicator that this person is looking for something like this, right? So you
Right.
identify a price index, and let's say jackets have an average price of 22,000. Then you start looking around that, right? So somebody who has a price index closer to the average, you start showing them products closer to the average, but you also keep some potential to upsell. And by upsell,
Right.
I mean keep one product which is priced at say 2,800 or 3,000, which is the best seller in that range. So that person will be tempted that, this is a really good product and maybe I can spend 3,000 here. And that way, the more money they spend, the more Flipkart gains, right?
Right.
So in a way, that was how I approached my first question. Then second was about product thinking, right? So as I told you about problem solving, any company that asks you about problem solving, right, can you have to create a plausible structure about how you're going to approach a problem. Then hit all the points one after the other, right? Then post which for the product thinking round, I was asked, how would you launch Google in Mongolia, right? So a very interesting thing happened to me when I was, as I told you, I used to read a lot of things when back in my college days, right? So I had read this article about color philosophy, right?
Yeah.
And it essentially meant that people can associate certain meanings to color, right? Like you can associate happiness to a blue color, and people
Right.
can associate feelings with colors, right? And Mongolia, I clarified the situation, had was a nation which was not under, which was did not have a lot of concerts, a lot of happy events. So I told them that we should, to launch Google, first thing we should have a carnival which should be comprised entirely of the colors in Google logo and nothing else. So everything in that carnival should be in colors of Google logo. And when people attend that carnival, they are going to see that they're going to be happy because they've never seen anything like it before. They're going to get excited and they're going to associate those feelings with Google and start trusting it as a brand, right? And I think that is the first step that any brand needs to do. That develop that trust that we are here to help you, we are here to make you happy, or whatever their mission statement is. And then I went around the standard mode of launching a product, print and TV. And I gave, I compared it with India of 1980s. and drew that parallel about how the things might be there, how there might be just one TV in 10 houses, and what time they would be watching, what are the biggest shows. And we kept going around about how can we monetize YouTube once it's launched. And it was a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But the key takeaway for product thinking rounds, right? Very standard questions come, right? How would you design a alarm clock for the blind, or how would you design a new walking stick for the blind, right? These are some of the most asked questions, right? And all of this require you to empathize with the user, right? Like I did with Mongolia, about what is it that those people crave, what is it that those people need, and how do you build that. So your product needs to be stellar, and then how do you communicate that your product has that value,
Right.
right? So combined with these things, I was able to answer this. And possibly if we have time post this and people want to know more, I can go in depth about how I approach the interview, but for the sake of time, I'll move forward. So then the last round was my technical round, right? And I had absolutely no coding background, and I get into the room, and the senior director of engineering for Flipkart is interviewing me, and I enter and I tell him, sir, I don't have any coding experience. So please don't ask me any technical jargons or coding, but if you would ask me the logic behind how things work and logic behind technology, I would be able to answer it better. And he's like, okay, so let me ask you something. So he started and he asked me, the first question was, if you go to a web browser and type www.flipkart.com and press enter, tell me what happens from the moment you press enter to the moment you see that page, right? And I remembered a few bits and pieces about computer networks that I had, learned or read somewhere. And I started building up that story, and I went by the logic of it. You have a computer, it's connected to internet, your computer has a unique address, which we know as the IP address, right? Which says, this is Anuj's computer, or this is a particular computer. And from this computer, you are going to send a signal to possibly a repository of central data, which is connected through a server, where the information of all the web pages around the world is stored. And just to make sure that because I've always seen that HTTPS in front of every website. So just to make sure that nobody is able to look at this interaction between me and the server, we are going to encrypt it in some way and send it to that key store and get that information from there and relay it on my PC, right? And then he asked me about cryptography, and thankfully I had read about Bitcoins. And that's why I keep telling, right? So the key to being a good product manager is to be excited about technology and to keep reading about it. He asked me about cryptography and how it works and what are symmetrical and asymmetrical keys. And I was able to answer it because I had taken one cryptography class on YouTube one day because I just found it interesting after reading Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. And it had a lot about cryptography, and I just took that one class, and it helped me on that day on the interview. And I would have never thought that information is going to come and help me here. And if you don't know much about technology, if you are not a expert coder, no need to worry. It's all about, try to break it down to the most basic building blocks and try to go by the most logical thing that you can present and explain it like you're explaining to a 5-year-old. I did that and I got in, right? So we were 13, we were a batch of 13 in the APM program and recruited from all over India. And I was one of those 13 people by using this philosophy. So instead of